Good evening, everybody. We're back with another exciting interview. Unfortunately, we couldn't join you last week because there was too many things going on, and the people who were scheduled or that I tried to get on couldn't join us. But we're going to make up for that tonight with a very wonderful special guest. We have Krishna Kshetra Swami joining us tonight. And he is a very prominent spiritual master in ISKCON, in the Hare Krishna movement. He is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada and an initiating spiritual master, so he holds a very prominent role within the Hare Krishna movement. I've known him loosely for 20 years or so and heard him give various classes, and I love his music. He sings beautifully, does wonderful kirtans, and he's been kind enough to join us tonight, or he will join us in a few minutes. I just started the presentation slightly early so that I could give a little introduction to him. I should be able to see you in a second, but I don't see you yet. I see 3 devotees, but I don't see you. So if you're just here, then I should be able to add you. This usually begins with a few technical difficulties, the interview. So also Maharaj, here he is. I'll just add him and then continue to introduce him. So he should be joining us in just a couple of seconds. I was also fortunate enough to be with Maharaj when he came to New Vajradam in Hungary, and to serve him there. Oh, Maharaj, I was able to add you. Okay. Wonderful. Here you are, Maharaj. Thank you for joining us. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for having me.
Usually these things begin with a slightly edgy anxiety over whether the technicalities will work, and tonight was no exception. But thank you so much for taking your time and being here with us. It's very nice to see you again. And
good to see you. Last time was in Hungary, wasn't it?
Well, we briefly saw each other at Bhaktivedanta Manor. I think around a year and a half ago, something like that. I think you came to give a class. But the most time that we've spent together was in Hungary. Yeah. I was just introducing you, Maharaj, and you're such a special guest that if I could just say a couple more sentences. So,
please.
So people who don't know you, they'll just realize, what the situation is. So I was saying a few things, and also Maharaj was in New Vajradam in Hungary a few years ago. I'm not sure exactly how many. And you were writing your book, Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics. And I was serving you or trying not to get in the way to some degree whilst you were there. And it was really lovely to have your association and to talk about a few different topics and get your insights. And so Maharaj has kindly agreed to join us tonight. And many of the topics that we're covering are to do with agriculture, are to do with sustainability, are to do with ecology. And we're very happy that various people in our local community here in Ashford in Kent, who are local producers, local business owners, local people trying to make a difference and to do something ecological and live in a more sustainable way, are listening to these presentations, whether here live on Instagram or later on YouTube. And Maharaj has written this wonderful book, which is all about cow care and the Vedic conception of it, or how it works. So we'd like to pick his brains in the nicest way possible tonight, and to get his insights into what that actually means. So Maharaj, maybe we can start, and I can just ask you, why is it that cows are so important according to the Vedas? For us, for a Western mind, we would think, a cow is just like any other animal. So why does it hold a special role in the Vedas?
Yeah, it's a good question, for which you can say that's the answer is my book. It's a whole book of explanation. Maybe I should do a little promotion here. I have a copy of it here, so I can show what it looks like. um, Published by an academic press, but it's open access, which is meaning that anyone can download the digital copy free of charge. Why are cows special? One way of understanding is in terms of benefits to ourselves, because as the way our minds work, as human beings work, we always want to see what's the benefit for me, right? And what's the benefit for us? So I've divided into tangible benefits and intangible benefits. And the tangible benefits, we're all familiar with cow milk. People are less aware that the two other items that come from the cow, and when I say cow, I mean also the male, the bull or the ox, are the dung and the urine. And something they've known in India since who knows when, since millennia, it seems, is just how beneficial cow dung and cow urine are. They're good for the health of the soil of the earth. They're extremely good for the health of the soil. So they function as nutrition for the soil. And they have medicinal value. The ancient Indian system of medicine called Ayurveda, which means literally the knowledge of life duration, how to make the best of our life duration. So there's a lot in there about benefits of cow dung and cow urine. And there are other we can say practical uses of both of these. They're used in cleaning in Indian villages. They're used, cow dung in particular is especially valued as fuel and as a purifier. Mud walls and mud floors are made fresh and pure by smearing them with a mixture of cow dung and water, and this is done regularly in every village. And it gives such a nice atmosphere if you visit such villages, you'll feel there's something quite special about the atmosphere, and much of it is that. Fuel also, cow dung is important. And then there are intangible benefits, and the intangible benefits are a bit difficult for us in the West to appreciate because they're intangible. We don't see them. We like to, we want to see physical results, or we want to see financial benefits and so on. But simply to have cows, to be in the presence of cows, It's understood again in India that if you want to be peaceful, if you're having some emotional disturbance, then cows are ideal to just be around. In general, they're understood, their presence is understood to be purifying the atmosphere, purifying the earth, the water, and so on. Now, so we can get a little sense of their value from that, but there's another dimension which is also difficult for Westerners to appreciate. But this is, how shall I put it, a kind of cosmic dimension. Cows produce milk. Of course, animals also, other animals produce milk, but cow milk in particular is favored. And from milk, we can make several products. We can make milk, yogurt, we can make butter. And from butter, there's something which is especially valued in India. If you take butter and heat it on a very low flame for some time and skim off what comes to the surface, eventually you get purified butter, what is called in India ghee. And then ghee is used in cooking. It's also used in special, especially in festival cooking. But in particular, it's used in what's called yajna. And this is this sort of ritual center of what we call the Vedic tradition of India. And the thing for us to try to appreciate about this is that it's a kind of recognition and confirmation that we as humans have a very particular role to play in the world for cosmic maintenance, for keeping everything in the right sort of balance. And that is expressed through this kind of ritual process in which a key ingredient is ghee, in which this clarified butter is offered into fire. And looking at this from the outside, it just looks like, it's a ritual. Mantras are chanted, invocations. This liquid ghee will be poured into the fire. And what do you see? You see these material things. But what we don't see is how a certain cosmic order, if you like, is being affirmed. And to make it all work, one has to keep cows. And keeping cows doesn't just mean keeping them as we see in the modern industrial agriculture worlds, that for the dairy farms, they'll keep the cows as long as the cows are giving milk, and then when they're giving less milk, they will send them for slaughter. No, that doesn't work. And why it doesn't work? Because it turns out that cows are extremely sensitive beings. They're very conscious. And those who have cows, who live with cows, where the idea is to keep them lifelong, not killing them, letting them live their natural lives, the cows seem to know it. They seem to know I'm safe. I'm going to be cared for throughout my life. And so they are peaceful, and because they're peaceful, the milk they give, and from that, the butter and then the ghee is of a quality which can't be matched by any artificial means. Now, there's another, we're still on the question, what's so special about cows? Here I want to refer to Mahatma Gandhi, who is well known for his campaign for liberating India from British rule in the first half of the 20th century. What's less known is that he was a very big champion of, well, animal protection in general, that is, to not unnecessarily kill animals, and in particular of cows. He wrote extensively on this subject, or repeatedly. He gave many speeches on the subject. And one point I found in my research that really struck me, and that was that human beings, through their care of cows, develop or establish a proper relationship with all other living beings. In other words, life is complicated, and we struggle in so many ways in this world. In order to survive, we have to eat. In order to eat, the fact is we have to kill. It doesn't mean we have to kill animals, but in some places of the world, perhaps seems to be at least the only alternative. But what Gandhi was saying is that a sort of gateway, you can say, into understanding how we should properly relate with our environment in general, but with other animals more specifically, is the cow. If we care for the cows, we will have naturally a sensitivity by which we will better know how to act and how not to act in relation to other animals, other kinds of animals. Now, one can still say, okay, but why cows? Why not, I don't know, many other sorts of animals? And I would just point to, well, I mentioned the word Vedic. The Vedic literature is, it's considered foundational to Indian civilization in particular. The tradition says more broadly human civilization. And there we find that cows, cow care, we find in Bhagavad Gita especially, it was one of the major duties of one of the major categories of occupation for farmers, was, in particular farmers, has been what's called in Sanskrit go raksha. Go means cow and raksha means protection. And I was just thinking about this today, that in one of the ancient texts, one of the Upanishads, we have this story of Nachiketas. He was a boy, and his father. And the boy, Nachiketas, was sort of standing by and watching while his father was giving many things away in charity. Giving in charity is very much praised in Vedic literature as a way for human beings to sort of get right with themselves and the world. So this, the father of this boy was giving away, he was giving cows, which is especially appreciated. To give cows and there are details: when to give cows, who to give cows to, who is qualified to receive a cow, and so on. So he was watching his father, and at one point he said, "Dad, why are you giving away these old cows?" And his father gets kind of annoyed that his son is pestering him like this. So that's another part of the story, but I won't go into that. The point here is that the father was giving away old cows. So what that means is that old cows were not killed. He was giving them away. Now the son was saying, it's not nice to give old cows away, because what's going to be the value for those who receive? They're going to have to maintain. So the point is that they're not killing the old cows. And so there's a sense that cows are valuable throughout their lives, not necessarily economically valuable, but in the wider, broader sense, they're valuable for human culture, human civilization, for getting the right balance with ourselves, with each other, with the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maharaj. That was very insightful.
So, I'm sorry if I was too long-winded.
No, of course not. No, that was wonderful. So many things were coming to my mind when you were saying that it's obviously a massive topic that you've explored in your book. I was just thinking that the Vedas talk about different members of society that are meant to be always protected, right? There's the Brahmanas, who are kind of like the intellectual or saintly aspect of society. There's women, there's children, old people, and then there's also the cows, right? So it seems to be something that the Vedas prescribes, that they are just to be protected and looked after. That's in one way in which we're supposed to engage with them.
Right. Yes, that's true. And what I was saying gives a little hint of the reason for that. But you're bringing this up just like we, I mean, it sounds crazy, but we never think to kill our old people because now they're old and useless and they're just too much trouble to maintain. So in this culture, the same sense is there with cows. And particularly, it's emphasized that the cow is identified as a sort of mother. Not just the female cow, but again, all bovines, they're considered like mother, associated with the earth, they're nourishing. And so this analogy is made that we don't kill our own mother. Similarly, we don't kill the cow. And the implications of this, the economic implications, it's hard for us to fathom. But it means making quite profound changes, really.
maybe you could say more about that, Maharaj, the economic implications of maintaining cows, because I mean, we have various farm communities around the world, but we also have in the UK the Ahimsa dairy farm, which I saw you visited on your website. I saw pictures of you there.
Yes.
And I know that Sitaram Prabhu is struggling with that in one sense to understand. I know he said to me, what is the economic solution for bulls or for oxen? That
Yeah.
how will they maintain themselves? You know, how will they help us to maintain them? Like the cows, they produce milk, which you can sell, which he's
Yeah.
selling. But the bulls and the oxen, how does that work? Is it just that you're, you know, spending money to look after cows, and you just kind of expect that to come back through the cosmos, as you mentioned, through, you know, some goodwill of the universe, or does it actually make economic sense to protect cows?
It makes economic sense to protect cows and bulls when we become genuinely dependent on them, as it is now, because we have a fossil fuel based economy, which is an extractive economy at a rate which is dizzyingly dangerous. I was just earlier today watching a video, a short presentation. I mean, it's quite scary, the direction we're going, and how we are depleting our resources, destroying our environment. When we sort of draw back from all of that, and it means also slowing down. You know, oxen are not very fast. It means slowing down the whole society, really. And it means, as far as I can understand, because I'm not an economist, but as far as I understand, in the long run, it also involves some sort of state support. And you may say, well, how would it have been in ancient times in India? In ancient times, there would have been very large areas of open pasture where the inactive oxen could have been pastured, and that would have been the occupation of cow herds or oxen herds, to look after them, just to, you know, spend the day with them. That would have been their service. And the oxen and the cow, the bulls, they're doing a service. As I said, there's the dung and the urine they're giving throughout their lives, which is fertilizing the soil, and then that soil, that land will be, by some rotation system and so on, it can be used also for planting. And that's been recognized by some modern scholars, people who are studying agriculturalists. The value of ruminants, such as cows especially, for keeping healthy soil. But again, it would require, from the economic side, I think, in a significant way, support from the larger community, which means ultimately the state. Until the state recognizes the value, we struggle. And that's why Sitaram certainly struggles, and he has to his maintaining of his project requires that people who buy his milk have to pay quite a premium for that milk. They're willing to do it because they understand this is milk from protected cows, and so they're willing to do that. But in a sense, it's a kind of charity system, charity operation. But I think it also means a reduction, sort of overall, in the number of cows that would be populating a particular land. Now with industrial slaughtering, meat industry, they're producing and reproducing, and also for the dairy industry, they're producing sort of maximum numbers of cows and then killing. So it kind of circulates that way. The whole system of with the lifespan, giving the lifespan of a cow being 16 to 20 years, rather than 3, 4, 5 years, means and the practically immediate killing of the bulls, it means there's going to have to be a major adjustment. There's a lot of talk about, I haven't seen much actually doing. I know in New Vrajadam, they are planning, they're not just planning, they're constructing now a large hall where they're going to be having bulls or oxen engaged in energy production. That sort of thing, I think, needs to be developed. Certainly that's an area where engineers could get involved in developing really good oxen-driven machinery to maximize the translation of that energy into different functions.
Thank you, Maharaj. I was also just thinking that, is it not that oxen, they also, traditionally, they would be plowing the land,
And plowing the land, of course.
for grain production.
Yes, I didn't mention that. That's maybe the more obvious thing. But that gets into another subject, is whether we are over plowing the land. Should we be, reducing the way that we plow and the depth and width and so on, because of the opening up the earth, releases carbon. That's one of the problems of this kind of agriculture. But yes, they're used for that, for transportation of goods. And this involves then also you need teamsters. So instead of one man driving a tractor, which is using fossil fuel and going over thousands of hectares, you need many more skilled teamsters. And also it mentions in the Vedic literature, one should not overwork the oxen. And indeed, it says in one place, the minimum number of oxen to pull a plow, if I remember correctly, is 4. There should be 4, and preferably 6 or 8 pulling one plow. So that takes there's a lot of management involved to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it just hearing about it slows you down in terms of thinking of doing things.
Yeah,
Agriculture, the size of it immediately reduces, doesn't it? That
yeah,
the 1,000 acre farms or thousands of acres and these huge machines that we see them using these days.
yes. One of my colleagues in America who keeps cows and bulls in this way has pointed out that in earlier times it was the oxen, the bulls, and then oxen who were particularly valued. And when a cow was born, that was a bonus. Oh, we get some milk also.
Mm.
But the particular need was for the bull, the oxen. So yeah, slowing down, just thinking about it makes us slow down.
We're at a very interesting point sociologically now that people are becoming more and more aware of climate change and the destructive effect we're having on the environment. And I experience that I'm coming in contact with a lot of people, non-devotees, who are extremely ecologically minded. Like we have various initiatives in the local area where there are
Mm-hmm.
shops which have zero packaging, where we have organizations to get food from local producers and to reduce the dependency on supermarkets. And
Mm-hmm.
also, they have certain standards, like I mentioned in Kent Food Hubs here, where if you want to be a producer within that, you're not allowed to use plastic. You have to be cutting down on your food miles, how often and how far you're making your food travel.
Yeah.
So people are very concerned and diligently try and do something to counteract the direction that our climate damage is going in.
Mm.
And they're doing their best, they're trying to make a positive change.
Yeah.
And I think this knowledge from the Vedas is definitely something that could really help them to go further and to provide certain solutions to problems that we don't necessarily know the answers to. So what
Yeah.
advice would you have for somebody who wants to live in a more environmentally friendly way? Well, how can the Vedas or any knowledge about cows or agriculture or Krishna consciousness in general help people who want to do something good for the planet and live in a way with the least ecological footprint or carbon footprint? What advice would you give, Maharaj?
Well, it depends how deep we want to go into Vedic philosophy. Um, the thing is, I mentioned before, as starting from the sort of harsh reality of biological violence, that we as biological beings are consuming other biological beings. And to, I think a first step is to recognize that and to reflect deeply on the implications of that. So, what are the implications? Well, one implication that we understand from the Vedic tradition is that we are implicated. Implicated means that no matter how much goodwill we have and good intentions we have, there's something called karma, which literally just means action, but has the implied meaning that with every action there is reaction. And the reaction comes in any number of ways that we cannot see. In other words, it's a universe in which, um, along with the laws of nature, what we call laws of nature, like gravity and the various energies, There's also moral law, and that comes particularly, or is expressed in terms of what we call karma. And this is a problem. It's a problem for ourselves in the sense that, as we understand from the Bhagavad Gita, this is one of many lives that we go through. In fact, any number of lives that we are without beginning, in fact, and without end. And we're taking on these different bodies. And which sort of body we get is determined, practically speaking, by our action in a previous life. And for some people, that sounds great. They say, oh, okay, so when this life's over, I get another body. Yes, you get another body, but what sort of body? This has to be thought about. It could be that one gets a very miserable condition of life. Even if we get a human body, what sort of situation are we born into? We do not know. And so much of the teaching of yoga, which is a central idea of Bhagavad Gita, is about sort of redirecting our consciousness in such a way that, number one, we are reducing what we can call our karma footprint. Instead of our carbon footprint, we have a karma footprint. So reducing the karma footprint, but again, we cannot, just like we can't jump out of our shadow, we can't get away from our shadow. We cannot get away from our karma except by a process of yoga, and specifically bhakti yoga. And your whole project is called the Bhakti Project because this is what you are about. And in this understanding, it comes back to thinking about what we eat and thinking about the whole process of sourcing what we eat and then going even a step further than how we generally think about food. We think about the source, how it's grown and so on, and how it's comes to our table, as we say. But the bhakti component, which can facilitate reducing and ultimately eliminating the karma footprint, is to also become aware of what is our mentality in preparing that food, growing it and harvesting it and cooking it, and then thinking about, okay, now it's all ready for me to eat. No, it's not ready for me to eat. First, I'm going to offer it as a gift, as a gesture of gratitude to God. And if I can do this with some devotion, and that's the word bhakti is the Sanskrit for devotion. If I can do that, if I can make such an offering with devotion, Krishna says in the Gita, he says, even if you only offer me some fruit, you just pick an apple from the tree, and if you offer that to me with devotion, I will accept it. And if God whom we understand from our tradition we call Krishna, the all-attractive one. If he accepts our offering, we are freed from any karma implication. And there's a bonus because Krishna is very kindly allowing us then to take the remnants of that food. He doesn't, it doesn't sort of disappear into a black hole. There are stories, sometimes it does disappear. but generally, Krishna is very kind. He leaves it for us. After he is enjoyed, he leaves. We take what we call the remnants, the prasad, and that not only is the karma footprint zero, but the bhakti, footprint, maybe it goes up. We gain in devotion. We are rewarded by greater feeling of a greater understanding, I would say, also of our position within this whole universe, within the environmental situation. And then that's going to lead naturally to making right decisions on the practical level of what to do, what not to do for the environment in the best possible way.
So Maharaj, you're saying that if we take our food, which necessarily involves violence, and I think what you're indicating is that even if we're vegetarian, then we're eating vegetables, we're eating fruits, which damages or kills that plant, then if we're understanding that that comes from God, and we're offering that food back to God, back to Krishna, then our karma becomes nullified in terms of taking that from nature in the first place. And then that will help us to think more clearly and be able to deal with other issues like the environmental issues.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We'll be able to think more clearly. And thinking clearly, we'll understand more clearly. What we understand is how small we are in this whole cosmic situation. That makes us humble. And when we're a little humble, then we're more willing and able to distinguish between what we need and what we want. Our problem in this world is desire. We all have desire, and we suffer from, in particular, we suffer from a disease of greed. We think we need more than we do, and from that, we suffer. Other human beings suffer. The whole world suffers. So we can think more clearly if we follow this process.
I think that although people may be well-intentioned and they want to do something good for the planet, then, as we were saying, they may not know what is the best thing to do. And typically in our Western mentality, it's all based on empirical knowledge. It's based on research of, we've done this research and this is the conclusion, or this is, what we think is to be the truth. And it just goes off in so many various directions, like such as many people these days think that cows are really bad for the environment, that they're producing methane, and that this is, contributing to global warming.
Yeah.
So that's one reason also I think why so many people are becoming vegans. I don't know what the situation is over in Poland, but here in the UK,
Yeah.
it's like skyrocketing, this veganism.
Yeah.
And people think that cows are a problem in terms of
Yeah.
global warming. So what would you say to that, Mirage? How would we, because people can, if they get certain data, certain information from certain sources, and then they're convinced that, cows should be, you know, not, I don't know, abandoned or not bred and not used. We shouldn't come in contact with them because they're bad for the environment. So what
Hmm.
can we say to such people?
Well, first, I would agree that cows in such numbers as are being kept, again, I mentioned this before, this sort of industrial uh, production of cows and then the products of cows. Certainly, this is bad for the environment. Like any other kind of mass production involving living beings, it's going to be damaging. So, in this respect, I think we have a lot to learn from the vegans, and I appreciate the broadly speaking, a lot of what vegans are arguing for. I myself, not to boast or something, but I decided some years ago that I'm not going to take any dairy unless I know that it's coming from cows that are being protected for life. And that means I'm not taking very much dairy. um, and since I'm older, that turns out to be better for my health anyway. But I think the total cow population would, as I mentioned, be considerably reduced, but more people would have more connection with cows, as we've seen in not so many generations ago. People had a farm and they had a few cows. And I've heard it repeatedly, not only in India, but uh, the the ethos of keeping a few cows or a couple of cows was that these cows are family members. We consider them part of our family. And in that relationship, what the vegans are concerned about, we're also concerned about. What's problematic with some of there's a whole spectrum of vegan ideas. And on the more extreme end, the abolitionist veganism says that, as best I can understand, they say that humans should essentially have no connection, no relation with animals. There should be no domestication of animals and so on. And I would say that goes along with a certain component of the Indian tradition, namely the renunciants, those who have renounced their family, they live in the forest. Yeah, they have nothing to do with domestic animals. Although we read about ashrams where maybe there were some deer who would naturally gather because it was so peaceful and so on. But what the vegan abolitionist is not considering, it seems to me, is that if you're completely disconnecting from animals, that means if you're going to do any farming, plowing the fields, as you said, preparing the field, and so on, if you're going to do any transportation or anything, you have two choices. Either you're going to use machines, which are ultimately run on fossil fuel, or you're going to be doing it yourself. You're going to be getting out there with a shovel and a pick, and you're going to find out very quickly that for the amount of wheat that you want to grow for one loaf of bread, you are not going to be strong enough to prepare that field. And even if you manage to prepare the field, you're not going to have energy left over to grind the grain and to, and what's the fuel going to come from that's going to bake your bread? So as far as I've been able to see, this hasn't been thought through by the abolitionist position of the vegan movement. But again, I really appreciate much of what the vegan movement is saying. They are very much concerned how are animals being treated. I would just say let's really focus on how industrial agriculture is treating animals, and let's do whatever we can to stop that. But to say we should have therefore no animals, we don't have any evidence of any time in history or prehistory that human beings were not involved with animals. And I don't know how that would work in practical terms. How human beings we're very dependent beings. The other choice is to become hunter-gatherers. But that means hunting, and that means killing. So, what do you do?
Yeah. I was just speaking to one lady recently, Kate from the Kent Food Hubs, and we were discussing about how to develop food security here in Kent amongst various producers, or just kind of throwing up some ideas. And she was saying how one shop in Folkestone called Restock, where they only sell things without packaging. It's like they have dal in a jar. You come in and bring your own package, your own bowl or whatever, and you take it away. She was saying how the washing up liquid there is manufactured, I think, in the next house, and you come and you take it. And she said, actually, even when they transport things for that washing up liquid, it's done with electric vehicles. And I said, that's okay, but I said electric vehicles are not sustainable either. It's not that solar panels are good. You're going to put them in your compost heap, and you're going to get, compost out of them, and you're going to that's going to pollute the environment. We see, huge solar panel farms these days, at least in England. They're using huge swathes of land, and it's all made of glass and electrics and plastic.
And after a certain number of years, those things break down. They have to be replaced.
Yeah. So I said to her, forget the electric vehicles. You should use a bullock cart. And the look on her face when I said that was kind of mixture between shock and kind of happy surprise that actually that sounds kind of good in a way.
Yeah, people don't think of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it takes us back to such a point in our past that in one sense is kind of shocking in the sense that it may be primitive, but in another sense kind of comforting in the fact that actually that's what people did for thousands, modern science would say for thousands of years.
Right. Yeah, this we've lost touch so much that we forget that it's even possible to live that way. And so when we think, how would we actually do it, it becomes difficult to think how would that work? And we're
Yeah.
so locked in to the economy that we have, which is so deeply artificial. Not just artificial, but it's um, yeah. I mean, it's really dangerous. I think what we're doing with it, the whole system of investment and high finance and so on. It's just extracting from the planet like anything. So we how would you do that? We don't even know. But that's very nice to hear that people are thinking about this in your area and doing what they can. That's wonderful.
And I'm assuming it's not just in Ashford in Kent that people are thinking about these things. I know that this Kent Food Hubs, just for instance, is connected to the Open Food Network, which
Mm-hmm.
began in Australia, and that's kind of a global thing.
Uh-huh.
And it's like the more I learn about just these kind of sustainable, ethical projects, then I hear of so many more. So
Yeah.
there's a lot I
Yeah,
think that as devotees we can learn from people who are trying to develop these projects and we can collaborate
definitely.
with them.
Definitely. Yes. And it gives us hope also that there are people with some sensibility like this, more and more people. I mean, it wasn't very long ago, a few decades ago, when any kind of concern about the environment was a very marginal thing. It was only very socially marginal people who were even talking about these things, and a few intellectuals and a few scientists. But now uh, it's become very mainstream, and I think that gives some hope. I sort of oscillate between hope and, completely, oh, we're we're headed off the deep end.
Maharaj, I was going to ask that is there hope? What do you think is going to happen that we're living in such a way where, as you said, at the high speed, we are basically destroying the world around us.
Mm.
Um, and from what we hear, then the pace of that needs to be slowed down at a very high rate. And even though promises are made by various institutions or governments, it seems those targets are never hit. So
Yeah.
what is it that, I mean, I know I sometimes ask you these speculative questions. Then what is it that you think is going to happen? Like, are we going to all,
Let me look into my crystal ball. No. As I said, I oscillate between sort of hope and hopelessness, but um, as human beings, we can't live without hope. And so the hope may be pinned to the sorts of initiatives that are going on that you've described, the sorts of things that a few devotee Krishna communities are trying to do, and perhaps a certain amount of miracle, in the sense that there can be changes which none of us can anticipate, because we are so limited in our individually and collectively. Just like this pandemic, nobody who had this idea, ask all the astrologers. So how come you didn't predict? Oh, we were predicting. I don't know. Why, if you did, then why didn't you make it known? So on the positive side, miracles are possible, but we don't wait for miracle to happen. We don't just sort of wait for some magic to happen. We use all the intelligence we can. We speak as much as we can about what we understand needs to be done. We give example as best we can, practical example, and also in our whole lifestyle. And as you mentioned, we also recognize that so many people are doing good things and we have so much to learn from them. So let everything that's valuable in practical terms be learned and further spread. But my latest concern or thinking is that unless there's some truly revolutionary changes in our economic system, and I don't mean that now we should all become communists or socialists or something like that. There's one movement called slow money, where they find ways to invest in projects which are which are protecting the environment instead of destroying the environment. So that sort of thing. There are ideas about developing different kinds of local money, where you have internationally exchangeable money, and then you have local money, which kind of forces what you were mentioning before, having local products. That local economy becomes developed, encouraged by local money, and that can be supported by the national government. But then you start to ask, okay, what's the political system that would make that possible? Well, that needs more intelligence than I have. From the Vedic tradition, we understand that's what kings do. Kings who are also sages, Raja Rishi. Where do we find such leaders?
Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, there's so many questions, and like you said, it's difficult to know where we're at, what's going to happen, even though we as Vaishnavas, we have faith in our scriptures, in Srimad Bhagavatam, and in our teachers like Srila Prabhupada, who have described so many things. And also, it may sound strange to some, but what's to happen in the future as well. But maybe not all of the details are explained, like 2021 to 2025, and there's not a chapter necessarily about that. So I guess we'll have to just wait and see and do our best in the meantime. Maharaj, thank you so much for being with us. I don't want to take the whole night of yours. I know it's 1 hour later there with you in Poland. And I'm
well,
extremely
it's
honored.
been my pleasure. I hope sometime I can come visit your project.
Maybe worth coming and visiting after we actually have some land to show you. We don't have any land yet. Please bless us that that can manifest in time.
Yeah.
I like the slow money investment idea. I'll check that out.
Yes, do look for that. That's interesting. Well, yes, all the best for your project, and I'll be interested to hear as it develops.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much for your time. And anybody out there who's seeing this interview, please check out Maharaj's book, Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics. And he was explaining that it's free source, so you can actually download the e-version online for free. But I'm assuming that you can get a hard copy that you can purchase. Is that
Yeah.
right, Maharaj?
Yes, of course. And to find where to get the book, either to order as a hard copy or to download free, just search the title on Google and it'll come up.
Wonderful. Yeah, I found it very easily. Okay, thank you, Maharaj, so much for your time. I'm very privileged and honored that you came to us and agreed to be interviewed, and thank you for enlightening us and explaining those on these topics. I'm also going to check the book out and get some more information and also talk to, we're intimately, well, quite intimately connected to one dairy farm which is just down the road. I was there today, as I said in one message to you today, and I'll ask them to listen to this interview because they, although they're a traditional dairy farm, they've set aside a small herd which is never going to be killed, and they're selling the milk from those cows.
Very
and
nice.
and they love their cows. They want to look after their cows. So they're always interested to hear what is the Vedic conception of cows. Why are they so important? Why is their dung and urine pure? Because they love their cows. They've looked after cows their whole lives, but they don't have any of that insight into the amazing value of cows. So so hopefully we
that's very
can
nice.
give something back to them too. Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.